It's not
Certainly.
mine yet. Got it. All right. Pursuant to the applicable law and my determination that attendance by remote means is necessary because an in-person meeting is not practical nor prudent due to the declared public health disaster caused by COVID-19, this meeting is being conducted by video conference. The meeting is being recorded and will be available at the downtown Hyde Park Chicago website and on YouTube. This meeting is called to order. Okay. So let me get my agenda here. All right. Okay, so Rod, can you start us off with the poll results?
Certainly. It's going to pull these up on the screen. Everyone can see. We conducted a poll, which was really over an elongated period of time. I think it ended the first week in April regarding the major initiatives we had for the SSA. I've abbreviated them here. I have the long explanations, but it's viaduct beautification, Lake Park beautification, which is the median, Nichols Park, along 53rd Street, the attractiveness of 53rd Streets, that's east and west, and the attractiveness of 55th Street. So I've abbreviated those, but the longer definitions are up on your screen. So what we did was we asked the commissioners to rank their choices 1 through 5. And here are the results of that. Priority 1 would be viaduct beautification. There were about 6 responses out of a possible 9. And 5 out of 6, or 83%, voted for viaduct beautification. There was 1 vote for the attractiveness of 53rd Street. Priority 2, Lake Park beautification, which is the medians. We had 2/3 that thought that that should be number 2 priority. And we had 1/3 think that 55th Street should be that number 2 priority. The third one is Nichols Park. Again, 2/3 thought that that would be the number 3 priority. And then we had 1 vote for viaduct beautification and another vote for 53rd Street. Priorities 4 and 5 actually hit the 50% mark in terms of what should be 4 or 5. So the attractiveness of 53rd Street, half went for that priority number 4. 2 said that Nichols Park should be number 4, and 1 said 55th Street. Priority number 5, we actually had 4 answers, with 50% being the attractiveness of 55th Street, that being the 5th priority, and 1 vote each for 53rd Street, Lake Park beautification, and no answer. Now I put some notes down here. These are things to discuss. Some of the priorities are easier to achieve. Really, it's in reverse order what's easier to achieve. Because mostly priorities 4 and 5 involve programming, landscaping, things that we already can achieve with just commissioners and the SSA. Some of these are less extensive and less expensive. I talked about that for number 4 and 5. Some of these are multi-year projects. Others are shorter to complete. We have to spend the money for these things in 2023, but some of them, if we think of them as multi-year projects, and we're pretty sure that the SSA is going to be renewed, we can use some of that money to start on those things. And I said this earlier, it's quite possible that this list is completed in reverse order. So I've given you the results of the poll. I've added some of my thoughts. Is there any questions regarding this list, the poll, or any of the priorities? Okay.
Well, it's pretty clear, right? But everybody the majority want the viaducts, and then we've got a big clump that is Lake Park and Nichols Park have tied, and 53rd and 55th have tied. And so we have a rank ordering at least.
Day and
Right.
time, that's contingent on closing date, right? So that's, open.
Oh.
Yeah, I would say 2 days business days.
Greg,
Yeah.
Greg, is
Greg-
that coming from you?
I'm sorry, I was on the wrong link. Can you hear my, let me mute
Not
myself.
necessarily Andre,
mute.
but
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, so, Rod, you want to go on into now these various initiatives and what's been done so far?
Yeah, these are the two initiatives, and it's just a progress report on the viaducts and the landscaping. We were on a Zoom call last Thursday with the Chicago Public Arts Group for the viaducts. We had met with them the month previously and had asked them to do some evaluation for us and kind of develop a scope of duties, a plan, something that we can begin to plan the viaducts. They're in the middle of doing that, but I'm going to share the screen again because they did give us something interesting. Let's make sure I can find this. Well, mine, I'm going to have to switch something first. Hold on. Because they gave us a historical document. See if I can pull this up and share. Okay, here it is. This was an agreement that was done back in 2007. Excuse me for scrolling through this. I wanted to get back to the top, but this was a document for the viaducts for the artwork that you see now, the panels that Chicago Public Arts Group and the Hyde Park Arts Center had put together. And it was very interesting, even though this is encompassing in terms of where they're going to pull the artist, some of the work that was going to be displayed. In part, it's a very interesting document to start to provide a framework of what we might be doing with the document, with the viaducts. So one of the things as we go through this, clearly this is for something that happened, 15, 16 years ago. I wanted to just go back through this page, which was the agreement. This was between the university, Public Art Group, and Hyde Park. So all three of those entities were responsible for what we see now on 53rd and 55th Street viaducts. The interesting sum is we go back 15 years and we have a price tag of about almost $65,000, $64,950. And this is when the project began and ended. They got the artists, but it's more or less a framework for the art that we're looking to put there now. It's not the entire thing we're looking to do, but it is a historical document that I can send out to the commissioners just for history and review on this. But we're continuing to meet with the Chicago Public Arts Group. We're trying to evaluate what could be done there. There are some other things we know we need to do some extra cleaning. And that number or that proposal I'll be presenting at our next commissioners meeting from our vendor. So I did have our vendor separate that out. We can do a special cleaning for the viaducts, and we can do that cleaning more than once.
Great.
So we'll have those numbers. But that was pretty much where we are on the viaducts at this point. We're still meeting with Chicago Public Art Group. As I talked about in the survey, this is something that's going to be a multi-year project. We have
The
Go
artwork
ahead,
you're
Mary.
saying. I just wanted to clarify, you're saying that the artwork is going to be a multi-year project.
I'm looking at the viaducts as a whole,
Okay.
the artwork being a part of it. It will have to continuously maintain that. One of the things in our discussions with Chicago Public Art Group was that the panels were meant to be temporary. They were not meant to be there for the 15, 16 years that they're there now. There was some understanding that that would be maintenance, they would be swapped out. Clearly that's not happened, but it's something that the SSA is going to have to consider as an ongoing maintenance cost going forward.
Let me ask a question. The maintenance cost in what sense?
If the art is intended to be there for 5 to 10 years, then at some point within the new SSA, assuming that it's been formed, and I'm using the word presumed because we're still in that process, that will become a maintenance budget either over the years if we swap pictures out in sections, if we do it as a whole. That's going to be continuing maintenance in addition to the cleaning, in addition to any painting or any other programming or infrastructure costs that we add. So the art's not meant to be permanent.
So my question then is the fact of the art and the way that the art is displayed, is that intended to be permanent? Or can we get rid of those panels completely and do something else?
I don't even think that the panels, and Diane, you were with me, jump in, please. I don't think that the panels were meant to be permanent. I think that, yeah, I think that that was just a kind of a temporary fix until.
Yeah, so this is the temporary agreement for those said panels, which is now expired. So what we have asked of Chicago Public Arts Group, so Rod mentioned that we met with them, but I'll give a little bit more context. So we met with them the first time to do a walkthrough of the viaduct so they could see the site conditions as they currently exist. Our second meeting was on Zoom to ask them to provide us a proposal to do the assessments of the art on both viaducts. Not because the viaducts there's separate projects here. Infrastructure and then beautification art, you know, and existing art. So the step with the art is engaging the arts group. And since they are pretty much the owners of most of that group or a part of it, they have specialists to be able to come out and assess the existing art, whether it's, you know, behind the panels, what the conditions are, and like what needs to be done in order to do something new or restore what's existing. So we think the panels were probably, and George will agree with me, was probably put as a temporary solution. Instead of restoring the murals, they just put up panels.
No, not quite. That's close, but not quite. The panels are intentional. They are meant to be long-term. They are referred to as curtains. The walls behind the panels are essentially destroyed. I mean, they're just, the murals that are there are irretrievable. You know, they cannot be restored. They're way too far gone. This assessment was done before the panels ever went up. When it was announced originally, we were told that the panels were being installed the way they were. They're all hung in frames. They're not on the wall. They're not mounted on the wall. They're on metal frames in front of the wall, with the idea being that the water that would wash down the walls would not touch the panels, so the panels would be fine and the panels would cover over the disgusting walls. Nobody has the budget to completely rebuild the viaducts, which is the only way to fix the walls.
Mm-hmm.
So that the panels then were supposed to be taken down, and the pictures could just, you know, new artwork could be placed over the old artwork and then just remounted. Or if the panels had gotten damaged, then they could be easily replaced and rehung back up on the walls. The other thing I wanted to mention while I'm speaking is we have to be very careful that we do not mess around with the mural that's on 55th Street. That is a protected.
Correct.
No,
that one's existing. Yeah.
Yeah, and the original artist is still alive and in Hyde Park, and we'll have our heads handed to us if we try to do anything to that mural.
Oh no. What we're going to need to do is that one. I'm sure there'll be recommendations around restoration and parts of it.
It was restored just less than 5 years ago.
Yeah, so maybe touch-up painting and then obviously pigeon relocation program.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And
what-
lighting. So there's multiple things at play.
Right.
But what we're just asking of the arts group at this juncture is just to assess the conditions of the art under the viaducts and their recommendations. So they'll get someone to come out and do that. And they're gonna give us a proposal before we engage it. So.
No,
so
my
we know what
question
it
is,
costs.
well, yeah, that was my question. Who pays for it? Since it's theirs, do they pay for it or do we have to pay for it?
Well, we were engaging them, so we were hoping
Right.
to pay for it, and that's why we're getting a proposal so we can share it, the costs, to see what, if it's something we can do, if it's feasible. So before they do the work, they'll provide the proposal.
Yeah, Mary, we knew going into this that this was a multi-constituent, multi-stakeholder project. And it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. The viaducts are a priority. They're the priorities that the commissioners have set. But the complexity and how easy it is to do it, it's quite possible that we're looking at things in terms of a completion, that things will be completed in reverse order. So what the priority says is that the bulk of our resources, we will try and put it on those priorities. But if we look at things in terms of completion, we have, especially with the viaducts, and this is true with the medians as well, we have multiple constituents and stakeholders that we have to get all in agreement. George?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we have to foot the whole bill or if they're gonna foot part of the bill.
That was
George,
actually
go
what I
ahead.
was wanting to comment on. Two things, two thoughts in that, in concerning that. One is that originally the costs were split. I don't know what proportion between the university and the ward offices. So I don't believe CPAG or the Hyde Park Arts Center paid for any of it originally. It was all funded through the university and the fourth and
Okay.
fifth wards.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone from the SSA has been in conversation with the university as to whether or not they would be interested in being involved in doing a co-cost share for this project. It would make a lot of sense. The other thing I wanted to add is that we really, as much as is possible, should really try to get anything we can going in the viaducts ASAP, because this year we have the expanded budget and we won't have that sort of a budget next year. We know, I mean, we won't have any budget until August or September next year. So next year we'll be very hamstrung in terms of actually completing anything beyond just our basics. So anything that we can get going this year, we really should do our best to do so.
Rod, do we still need the screen sharing?
No, we don't.
Okay. 'Cause Charles, it looked like your hand was raised, but is it?
Well, not really. I'm just happy to be on. I wish
Okay.
somebody would send out a link just 15 minutes before these meetings, running all over the place trying to find a link.
Yeah.
So anyway, I know we're talking about the if somebody can go back, probably Wallace or somebody who's back in the day when the Hyde Park Chamber was involved with this statue on 55th Street. George, you probably know about it. So, it's these artists come in and we hire them to put up these statues, we do this work, but then who covers the insurance of keeping it up? So I think that's where we are, and we have to, when we get involved in something like this, we have to make sure that we see it all the way through, not just having it up, but somewhere who's protective of it, who's going to care for it. So that was coming in late. I don't know what was discussed earlier.
Okay.
Well, you're absolutely correct about that. The maintenance, the upkeep became a huge issue with the statue on 55th because literally it was falling down on its own. Bricks were all over, falling into 55th Street, and the artist still didn't want us to touch it. So it became a hazard until a car took care of it.
Wonder who was
Roger.
driving that car.
Yeah. Go ahead, Roger.
A question for Rod. Could you update the status of conversations with CDOT and the railroads, if there have been any? Thank you.
We're still preliminary. There have not been any conversations with CDOT or the railroads at this point.
Are they involved in this?
I think, and anyone can jump in on this, I think one of the prudent things to do is to get something identified, and that's what the engagement with CPAG is doing. We're trying to get something that we can present to people. We can engage a lot of people and say, hey, this is what we're thinking, and we might get yeses, we might get nos, we might get maybes, but when we have something concrete to put in front of people, we should do that. That doesn't preclude us from at least, saying, hey, we got some ideas and talking about it. But I think the quicker we get something concrete, the quicker we can find out how all the elements are going to work together to get this completed.
Okay, shall we go on now to the landscaping on Lake Park? Because
You
it
have a
looks like
couple of
we've
more
got
questions,
a couple more
unless you
questions.
want to.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead, George.
Actually, Greg had his up first,
Oh,
but I
first, okay. Go ahead, Greg.
Thank you, George. Okay, I get that art is a complication here. Is there an overall plan that we can look at holistically? So we don't, just so we can see sort of like the bigger picture, not fall into the details.
Yeah, we're looking to put that together with CPAG. That's why we've asked them to come up with a proposal. So we're looking at that with them.
Okay,
George.
and I hate to interrupt the discussion that's ongoing, but I noticed that we do have a quorum now. And I know some of our commissioners are very pressed for time. So I was going to make a motion that we temporarily suspend the program committee and switch over into our commissioner special meeting so that we can do any of the voting and discussion that we need to while we do have a quorum. And then we can continue with the program committee when we're completed.
That's fine with me. I was going to suggest that we just quickly go through the remaining item and then go into the program, the other committee, but we can do the special meeting. Go ahead, Greg. You're running it, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared for that. We are running is this the conversation about the events?
It's this, yes.
Yeah, let me think about get my thoughts together for a second.
It's the Hyde Park Summer Fest.
Sure. Okay, Jonathan Swain proposed he sent us some proposals. I think it was 10, 15, and 25, but I felt like they're very flexible and we can come up with whatever, I don't think we're limited to those three numbers. But I think
Greg, can you please turn down the volume on whatever's running in your office there?
Yep, let me move to a different office there.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I think it would be best if Mary, you continued with your meeting. That would give me 5 minutes just to pull up what Jonathan Swain sent us so I can just review it and open up that conversation with some organization.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what's left is the land park landscaping. Rod.
Right. We opened up an RFP last Wednesday to invite landscapers to bid on this process. We earlier had Clarence Davids, who was our prior bidder, just update what they bidded 5-6 years ago. There were some things that were added that required us to create an RFP to send it out to more bidders because there were things that were being asked. In other words, there was like some maintenance that wasn't in the original RFP several years ago that we began to put in and extend dates. So we built a brand new RFP and sent that out. We don't have any submissions, but the date is for, the closing date is this Thursday, the 4th. So we're still waiting for landscapers or prospective vendors to bid, and then we'll present those more than likely at the commissioners meeting when we've had a chance to evaluate them.
Have specific companies been requested to put in an RFP?
Yeah, we had one fellow SSA who had a list of people that they use, and Diane sent that out. In addition to that, I put it on the city's portals and passed it around to many of our SSA counterparts. So we've cast a wide net. Clarence Davids, I sent that bid back personally to them with the updated specifications. So we've casted a wide net. We're just waiting for bidders to return that. It was fairly extensive. So my guess is vendors are taking their time to go through it. And sometime on Thursday, I'm expecting several bids.
Okay, thank you. Greg, are you ready? If
yeah,
not, go ahead.
Well, the last Jonathan Swain proposal I have was from April 4th.
I'm
And
gonna, Greg, I can pull it up.
you have a newer one. Great.
Yep.
Mary, we're just gonna look through this proposal. We can go to me, or you can continue on and return to you.
We just have questions and comments, so let's go ahead and do you.
Okay, can everyone see Rod's
Yes.
screen? So what I found the most interesting thing about this was not the 3 proposals page, but Rod, further down in the presentation, there was a page that showed all of the different neighborhoods that had people that Jonathan was recruiting to visit Hyde Park, and which made me think, oh, we get to tap into the customer acquisition budget. It's not these pages. Okay, well, maybe that was, scroll up for a second. 40,000, okay, well, I guess this will do. 40,000 people is twice the size of Hyde Park, I believe. Does that sound right? Do you guys know how big Hyde Park is? How many residents?
It used to be 40,000.
It's 32,000 in the last census.
Okay. So 32,000. Okay. And there was, okay, so there was a page I wasn't imagining where it said, it was like, Lincoln Park goes to Hyde Park, or Lakeview goes to Hyde Park, or Bronzeview goes to Hyde Park. It showed his campaign that showed all these different marketing, all of his collateral, where he was promoting Hyde Park to different neighborhoods around the city. And so I thought, well, this is like a really good way to promote Hyde Park in general as something positive. And I think he disguised the brand as sort of like fun, but also loving, in a way to position Hyde Park as a really positive place to be. So I thought that was really exciting. And I thought he had a history of being successful at attracting people from outside of Hyde Park to this festival. And so if we can pay him to spend money furthering that social media reach, if, you know, since it's been successful, it felt like, oh, let's grow a winning proposal, a winning strategy. That's sort of how I left our meeting. Does anyone else, did anyone else have a different take?
My question is, if this is taking place on the Midway, how much is actually going to overflow into the neighborhood in terms of money spent by all these people who are coming in?
Sure. So I saw it as the money isn't getting spent in the footprint. It may be some overflow, but what we were paying for is the branding of Hyde Park. And we were using this as an opportunity to promote the neighborhood in general. That was how I, it's a little bit of a stretch, but that's how I saw the value.
I would agree with what Greg is saying, that I think its impact and its value for 53rd Street or 55th Street per se is probably going to be minimal. People aren't going to come over and go to lunch from the Midway on our streets, but it's the publicity of the community, of the neighborhood, that's valuable, and it's the target audience that he goes after, which is the audience that I think would benefit our neighborhood in the long run. So getting the idea of Hyde Park fixed in people's brains is a very valuable. Remember, we used to have a service with hotels downtown. It was a concierge service in which they would have our brochures and event calendars and all that stuff. So if you're a tourist in town, you could see what there was going on in Hyde Park. And it wasn't huge, but it did make a difference. And I tend to think that something like the Summerfest would make a much more significant difference longer term, rather than just the immediate event itself.
I agree with what you all are saying, but I have to look at what an SSA is, what it's designed to do, and what the policies are. The projects that we take on, the money that we spend has to be within that footprint, or we have to show how it's going to make a measurable impact on that footprint. An easy way to think about this, and there are, is somebody, Roger, I believe you brought this up to me. We talk about the 4th on 53rd, and one of the things that Dave mentioned, he said, well, we need more money for security. Well, the parade it starts in the footprint, it leaves the footprint, and then it comes back in the footprint. So the impact that I can measure is within the footprint. Nothing stops anything from going outside the footprint, but I can say the parade is going to bring in 5,000 people or whatever on 53rd Street. I have to be able to demonstrate that impact within the work plan for Summerfest. And if you can demonstrate that to me in more concrete terms, that's something I can report back to the city as they required. It's part of our work plan. So help me get there.
That sounds right if we were to pay for it from the event budget. But I was thinking this taps into the customer acquisition budget, which is something different, and that's to pay to promote Hyde Park.
You are correct. That's where it would come from. But when we have things, line items like the parade, it's how many people do you expect? It's part of the quarterly reporting. And
it's always, as your predecessor, one of your former predecessors used to always say, it's always the return on the investment. So what's our return for doing this? And from my perspective, it's a lot of that information that's sort of on the slide that's on our screen at the moment. The impressions, the social media, the outreach, the contacts, and that is demonstrable. Those are hard numbers. There are data that will back it up to show the outreach, and as such, it should be a measurable return on our investment. We can't show it in terms of income it generated, or even necessarily in terms of customers that it attracted, but there is an outreach and a communication effort that is showable.
Especially if we limit the investment. So if we limit the investment to, we want to amp up your social media spend, that's all quantifiable. And I don't think it's competing with the parade, but actually the parade is not very quantifiable. So to your argument, Rod, the festival is much easier to pull an ROI out of.
Carol has a question.
I just wanted to echo Rod's point that the spend for one event that benefits mostly one 53rd Street business is not very quantifiable, and I don't think it's fair. It's a huge amount of money, and it's not provable to us that the people really do come back to Hyde Park to spend money. It'll mostly be concentrated on the Midway. And you can see that from here's a good example. The Museum of Science and Industry, very well known, but that money, those people do not visit 53rd Street or 55th Street. So as somebody who contributes to the SSA in our tax dollars, I don't think it's fair. My mom and I don't think it's fair that one business on the whole footprint gets that kind of contribution to their event. Thank you.
Rod, can you stop the screen share so we can see people?
Okay.
Would it be fair
Thanks.
if we bought a billboard in the loop that said "Come to Hyde Park"? Would that be fair?
I think if you're spending SSA dollars, you have to say who's sponsoring it, and a big SSA 61 should be there. I'll say this, I don't see other SSAs being that direct about placing advertisements in our neighborhood. I mean, a newspaper or something like that. I'm not at this point comfortable with splattering SSA 61 in other SSA districts.
Well, okay. I mean, I posted in the chat an example of the marketing campaign, and I just thought it was interesting that, you know, when you're in Detroit, or you're in Indianapolis, or you're in the Gold Coast, you know, you're seeing promotions for Hyde Park in general.
Greg,
And
the
so
examples didn't show up.
they didn't show. They're not in the meeting chat.
No, your
Okay.
statement is there, but nothing else.
Okay, I have something from you, Greg, that was direct. Can you scroll the screen up?
You're sharing,
Also
not me.
page 13. Yeah, so I'll start to share this again.
And so for
13.
me, I thank you. And I didn't see this as paying for a business. I don't even think Kimbark Liquors is mentioned, and I didn't even see it as valuable as an event on the Midway. For me, I saw this campaign as, this is a great way to promote Hyde Park to people outside of Hyde Park, to help advertise our neighborhood in a really positive way. If you keep, well, I guess there you go, Bronzeville to Hyde Park, that would be an example. Let me see if I could. Figure out another way to send this to you guys. Rod, do you see what I posted or no?
You mean in the chat?
Yeah.
Let me open the chat back up.
Greg, is it the B Chicago graphic?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Rod, can I share? I've got it.
Yeah, let me stop sharing and let me open up sharing to multiple. Go ahead, George.
Is it visible?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what triggered me.
So South Loop to Hyde Park, North Side of Hyde Park, Logan Square to Hyde Park, Detroit to Hyde Park, Uptown to Hyde Park, Wicker Park to Hyde Park.
So Jonathan, my understanding was that he's already spending some money in these areas for these campaigns. Our funding would just help him, you know, spend a lot more money on the existing campaigns to promote Hyde Park with, you know, some of these images.
Think this is all fantastic. I think because it's coming out of SSA funds, it should say something about SSA 61. Because Hyde Park, I mean, we're it's overly broad for
Mhm.
the source of spending. If I were to, like, for instance, let's say take this downtown, they're like, okay, how is this benefiting the district? And when
Especially
you say
since,
Hyde Park, you're talking 57th Street, you're talking,
Right.
you know, you're talking a wide swath, you're talking
That's
50.
true. It's a
And-
rising tide lifts all ships theory.
Right, but it's from a procedural standpoint, can we do that?
Yeah. I understand.
I may make a point. Well, because we could be on this all day. But are we saying everybody's making a great point, I believe. Are we saying we're paying more than what we would be getting in return? Can we invest what we think we would get in what we get back in return, or should we not do anything at all?
I'm guessing those who are disagreeing are saying conceptually, we cannot do any of this. It's not really a matter of how much money should we spend. Is that, I think that's your point, Rod?
My point is basically, how will this benefit the footprint in a measurable way that promotes the downtown Hyde Park SSA number 61 brand? Draw that link, and I think you satisfy a lot of people. Right now it's fuzzy.
Yeah, I don't think we could just support something at Midway. At the same time, we don't prepare the SSA district for what's coming and prepare, make that link by saying, hey, okay, we spend some dollars over there. We need to spend some dollars on 53rd Street in the SSA area district to make that link. If we don't do that, we just putting dollars outside the door and closing the door.
Yeah, I'd like to see the case made. It's not a question of whether it's good or bad, but it goes back to Carol's point. She's asking the right question. What do I get out of this? I'm paying taxes, and there's a bunch of Carols. And each Carol has to ask that question. Okay, they look at their tax bills and they say the same thing that everyone else says. Okay, what are we getting out of this? And for me, I want to be able to make that case. So when I go to a Carol, or when I go to a Mac, or when I go to a university, or I go to Kimbark Plaza, you spend X, you will get X, because we're all businesses and we're bottom line.
and then there's the whole issue of the service industry, the service businesses. It doesn't benefit us at all.
I don't know. My thinking, in all honesty, was I would be willing to give Jonathan 10,000 to make sure he doesn't have the event on 53rd Street. That's my number one thought about this whole thing. I don't want it on 53rd Street. Get it away from here. It will pay you to move it somewhere else.
Is it viable? In which are questions that we have? Can we outline them and allow Jonathan to detail how this can benefit SECC? Invite him on, or invite him on a meeting or a call?
Well, Anthony, we got Wallace, who's representing those concerns. I mean, Wallace is taking all these things in, and he's, especially as a former executive chamber director, he knows these are all valid questions that people ask.
Yeah.
So Wallace is, I mean, you've got the floor to speak on this.
I first, as the head of the chamber, this sounds like my board used to debate whether we should support the Hyde Park Summerfest at all when it moved to the Midway. And part of the questions are, you've raised them about what it does for Hyde Park, even in the point of residents. When you give somebody a great experience in Hyde Park, they think this is a community I'd like to live in. From a business standpoint, that's a good thing called customer attraction. When you make the experience a rare experience, and this has become literally a national festival in the sense of coming to Hyde Park, Chicago. And I think that's an important aspect of growing this community. I mean, many of you were around once where I erroneously said the newspaper, the Herald said Wallace sells Hyde Park. Like, and there are those people who really obviously took that literally versus those people who knew that we were marketing Hyde Park. So think of it in that sense. It really impacts all of Hyde Park, residential and business. And the return on the investment is people come here, have a good experience, and when they go out again, they look for a place to go again where they can have a good experience. And I think that's exactly what this brings to. That sheet that showed all the various neighborhoods, those are people looking to us. We don't look to go to their community to spend money. We're encouraging them to come to this community. So I say that in sense, we don't control the hotels. Obviously, Anthony and Leroy, the Hyatt and the Sophie Hotel, the jobs. We will temporarily hire 500 people. Okay, think about it in that sense, the economics in a broader sense, but 500 people have money that they can spend at our businesses in Hyde Park. Think of it in that sense of how you have to continue to peel it back. So when we meet with the community, we try and help minimize the inconveniences and identify ways, small, medium, and large, it will benefit the community. And I think, Mary, one of the things I remember most, and George talked often, getting it off 53rd Street, the negative impact on businesses on 53rd Street offset in a great sense the positive impact it did for businesses on 53rd Street. But bringing people to Hyde Park, giving them a great experience and encouraging them to come back is really the bottom line that we want to think about. And I think the best way to evaluate if this is a good investment for the SSA, it's customer attraction in the best of ways.
If we spend a lot of money on banners on 53rd Street to attract people to Hyde Park. That's actually like the exact opposite of what Jonathan's proposing, right? Because the people who see the banners in Hyde Park are already in Hyde Park. They're Hyde Parkers. This is a strategy to get more people to visit Hyde Park that wouldn't normally think of Hyde Park.
Another way to think about this is that a different organization that we have a record of supporting for a number of years is the Silver Room Party every summer. And this year, if it returns, it's likely to be held at 31st Street. Now, it is a 53rd Street business, and it does a lot to promote the neighborhood. If they came to us and asked for funding, would we consider it?
That's another one. I was really glad that when it left 53rd Street. But Carol has her hand up.
I just have a follow-up question for Wallace. How would this spend of whatever the commissioners decide upon, how would that differ from what the museum's situation is? It's been my observation that there does seem to be very little spillover from the visitors at the museum to the businesses at 53rd and 55th. So how would you differentiate this particular ad spend versus that situation?
It's simply in branding. Museum of Science and Industry, where is it? You have to go to that destination versus the Hyde Park Summerfest. So the branding with Hyde Park in the name is one of the things that we push to draw people to Hyde Park. And again, moving it off 53rd, that was, Carol, one of the biggest concerns we had about the direct impact to our economic engines in Hyde Park by moving it to the Midway. And the chamber had to decide, do we think there is still some long-term positive impact in supporting it, even if it's on the Midway? And that was a split for us, and finally decided we thought it still would have residual return on the investment, even if it is on the Midway, because it is the Hyde Park Summerfest. We argued that with Eric in the Silver Room. We wanted him to call it the Hyde Park Silver Room Block Party, because we thought that was a stronger name for us to benefit. And now that it's moved to 39th Street or 31st Street Beach, it doesn't, people could not associate that with Hyde Park if they didn't know enough about the Silver Room on 53rd Street versus this festival. It's all about Hyde Park.
Well, just as a follow-up, the Hyde Park Chamber has a different mandate than the SSA. And the SSA has a far more restrictive set of rules, it would seem, based upon their tax funding.
Absolutely.
So that's all I have to ask. Thank you very much.
Greg, we're approaching the 11 o'clock hour.
Okay,
We have a
I'm
quorum,
gonna see.
Bill?
Does anyone want to make a motion to proceed with this festival? Okay, I think we've made a decision not to fund the festival. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. I think you have another item on your agenda there.
Right. We have a conflict with the city. They're doing an SSA forum on our commissioners' date. So I wanted to propose 2 dates that we move our commissioners' meeting to. It would be, pull out, Wednesday, 5/24 at 1 p.m. or Thursday, 5/25 at 11 a.m.
Wait, say that again. What is the time on the 24th?
24th would be 1 p.m. that Wednesday. And Thursday on the 25th at 11 a.m.
Okay.
Thursday.
Thursday.
Thursday? Okay. I had 3 more commissioners. Is that fine?
Works for me.
Works for me.
Okay, all right, I'll send out a message with that. Okay, it is 10:59. Mary or Greg?
Go ahead, Roger.
You skipped the audit item on the special
Yes,
meeting.
we did.
Right, the audit item, our audit is not ready, so we will not be presenting the audit for the special meeting for the commissioners to approve. We will have that as soon as we can. I need to get that meeting also scheduled, but I want to make sure we have our audit first.
Okay, the only other, oh yeah, go ahead, right.
Mary, did we need a vote on 53rd Street Parade? I just realized. Or was that
Okay.
covered earlier?
I believe that was covered earlier.
Okay, great. I joined late. I apologize. We're good.
Okay.
Okay. So the only thing that's left on the agenda is questions and comments. And I think we've probably done all those. So this meeting can be adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Okay.